Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Oh What a Show. This is a new Orioles-centric baseball show that we're going to be doing for the Sideline Sports Network, which is a digital media network that airs in 165 countries across the globe. We're happy to be with you today talking some Orioles baseball. Just to give you a little bit of a background on who I am, I'm Paul Valley. I'm going to be steering this ship a little bit here. This is Ryan Blake, who is my co-host, along with John Shearer, who is the big wig for Sideline Sports, who's going to be joining us on these shows. My background a little bit, I come from Utah Street Report. I'm a columnist for them. I also host the Bat Around for Press Box Sports, which is a weekly Orioles-centric 2-hour digital internet radio show that I do. Ryan, why don't you tell our listeners and our viewers a little bit about yourself?
My name is Ryan Blake. Very happy to be part of this show. And I also got my start with Utah Street Report. Um, I started writing for them shortly after my season on the Orioles tarp crew in 2012, which was the best summer of my life without a doubt. Had an absolute blast. Obviously, the Orioles made the playoffs for the first time in 15 years that season. Um, I've done a little bit here and there. I've been a bat boy with the Bay Sox. I've traveled the country as a youth coach with Ripken Baseball. I moved to Arizona to pursue scouting until COVID hit, and then I ended up back here, and now I'm actually back in school. So still doing a little writing, podcasting on the side. I started a podcast on Utah Street Report called "Give That Fan a Podcast," obviously in homage to Rex Barney, the former Orioles PA announcer at Camden Yards. But yeah, very happy to be part of this and keep going in the media game a little bit. And John, I guess we'll head it over to you.
A lot of our sideline sports people know what I'm about, but I'll just kind of reiterate that. Started an Orioles show back in 2015 that ran for about 4 years, and then that's no longer a show, but I'm in the media field, so I cover the Super Bowl, NFL Pro Days, a lot of the NFL things, the Hall of Fame, things of that nature. I've covered Baltimore Orioles games and events. I do a little bit of everything. I cover the WNBA, NBA, NHL, all these major sports I cover. And I'm diehard Orioles lover, and I'm a media member, credential media member for the Orioles. So, I work with Fox Sports as well, Blue Hawks 13 on Twitter. So that's a little bit about me. I love this. I love sports. It's my everything. And I'm excited to talk Orioles baseball.
Absolutely. So, everybody that's tuning in, you know that we're more than qualified to be kind of steering this thing here. And what we're going to talk about tonight, this is the inaugural episode of Oh What a Show. What we're going to talk about is what the Orioles are looking like in spring training. We all know that this is the last full week without regular season Major League Baseball until October. The Orioles are getting started on April 8th, which is next Friday, down in Tampa Bay, taking on the Tampa Bay Rays. And there's a lot of question marks going on with this team. And right now, the biggest question mark has to be in this starting rotation. We know that John Means is the ace of the staff, coming in strong after a nice year last year and a nice rookie year that saw him finish, I believe it was second in Rookie of the Year voting. John Means, the big lefty with the nasty changeup. They go out and then they sign Jordan Lyles to a 1-year, $7 million deal with incentives. He's going to be the number 2 guy in the rotation, and then after that, it's kind of a big question mark. We don't really know who's going to be filling out those last 3 spots. We can probably assume that it's Bruce Zimmerman. But then you're looking at the same cast of characters. They haven't really gone out and acquired anybody else to fill out that rotation. So you're looking at guys like Dean Kramer and Zach Lowther, Keegan Aiken, Chris Ellis, who are going to get shots at this rotation first and foremost. Later in the year, we're hopeful for guys like Grayson Rodriguez, DL Hall, maybe Kyle Bradish gets a shot at the beginning of the year. We'll talk about that in a minute. But guys, what are your feelings about the fact that Jordan Lyles was the only addition to this roster in the offseason, and they're going at the rotation the same way that it did last year, and we saw that was cataclysmic results in 2021?
Yeah, well, we're kind of grasping at straws here. I mean, seeing guys like Chris Archer signed today for $3.5 million is certainly something that would have fit the Orioles' budget. But we've seen a lot of pitchers these last few weeks go off the board for less than $5 million. And so it's certainly a little frustrating, especially when there are rumors circulating that the Orioles are offering big money at a player like Carlos Correa, and then they're seemingly, they lose out on him, and they haven't really done anything since. They signed Rougned Odor to be the second baseman. They signed Chris Owings to fill some spots in the infield potentially. But in terms of the starting rotation, like you said, Paul, it was Jordan Lyles, which was the biggest money contract Elias has given out to this point. And then it's the same guys that we've been auditioning for the last couple of years. So, you said it. We know what we think we'll see later in the season, injury permitting, with Grayson Rodriguez and DL Hall filling out that rotation. But to start off the year, yeah, we're hoping Bruce Zimmerman comes along. Dean Kramer has looked pretty solid aside from a couple bad pitches this spring. So there's a lot of question marks in the back end behind Means and Lyles.
Yeah, and I think the thing that none of us are talking about is, John Means will be 29 in a month and a half, almost a month and a half. He'll be 29. He had we love the no hitter, of course, but he really wasn't the same after the no hitter, right? And we all think of John Means as the ace, which of course he's our ace, but he tailed off a lot last year after that no hitter. If you look at his stats, he really fell off a cliff, which wasn't good for him. That was difficult for us. And I'm not questioning John Means, but at the same time, when you have a 29-year-old that's your ace and you have no identity in your rotation outside of him, I feel like they should have went and got something for him last year. As much as we didn't want to get rid of him, I feel like we should have got something for him because, whenever you're talking about dart throws and the season hasn't started yet, you're talking about dart throws for 3 of your 5 guys in the rotation. You don't know what you're going to get out of your number 2. You got a 1-year, $7 million deal you mentioned, but Means is the only guy that you can count on. Everybody else, you're really not sure, especially the other 3. So, dart throws before the season starts kind of scares me. And like you mentioned, right, it's going to be much of the same from last year when it comes to the rotation. The offense is going to have to do a lot of the heavy lifting.
Well, and the thing about John Means is even after the no-hitter, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit there. He was still good after the no-hitter. It was when he had the shoulder inflammation. His first 12 starts, his ERA was around 2.63. And then when he came back after the shoulder inflammation, it kept him out about 6 weeks. When he came back after that, his ERA in his last 14 starts was 4.88. And the problem with John Means is, and you're correct, he'll be 29 at the end of April. The problem with John Means is that each year that he's been in the big leagues, he's had that shoulder flare up on him. And that might be why he hasn't gotten that extension from the Orioles. Because, look, I'm not in the camp that says you trade good pitching when you don't have enough pitching in your system to fill out a rotation. So for me, it's you keep John Means, but maybe he hasn't gotten that extension yet that he's deserving of because of the fact that he can't keep that shoulder healthy. This is a big year for him in showing that the first half of the season wasn't a fluke last year. That spider tack that people were kind of behind the scenes speculating about, because once the spider tack went away, the numbers started inflating a little bit. And the shoulder inflammation, and combined with that, he's got a lot to prove to go out there this year and show that he's an ace and deserves an extension from the Orioles. We talked a little bit about Dean Kramer, and guys, last year was awful for Dean Kramer. He couldn't throw the ball over the plate. His secondary stuff he was bouncing it, throwing 58-foot curveballs. What I saw from Dean Kramer today was, I'm not going to use the word inspiring, but it gave me hope. That was a good Phillies lineup that he faced out there today. He went 3 innings. Now look, he gave up 5 hits. He gave up 3 runs. But those 3 runs came on 2 home runs, one from Kyle Schwarber and one from Nick Castellanos. And I'm not sure if you guys remember this or not. They got paid $179 million combined this offseason by the Phillies because they hit home runs. So the fact that he didn't walk anybody, a few more 3-ball counts than I would have liked today, but he didn't walk anybody. He got 9 swings and misses on his pitches. His secondary stuff was really sharp. And those 5 strikeouts that were 2 by Rhys Hoskins, 1 by Schwarber, 1 by Real Muto, and 1 by Bryce Harper, those guys are no slouches. Dean Kramer showed himself very, very well today.
Well, Kramer also had a good audition when he first came up in, I guess it was 2020. Got some good starts against the Yankees, pitched really well against the AL East. He was kind of repeating his competition for a while. And then, like you said, Paul, last year was a disaster for Kramer. I got to see Kramer pitch in the Arizona Fall League in 2019, and I fell in love with his stuff almost right away. He's got a really good pitch mix, a really good slow curveball that offsets his fastball, which touched 95 today, by the way, which is encouraging to see. But he's got a really good pitch mix. He's willing to throw any pitch in any count. He just hasn't been able to put it all together to this point. He needs to learn how to attack hitters, not leave pitches out over the heart of the plate. But like you said, it's been encouraging what he's shown in the spring so far. 7 strikeouts, no walks yet for Kramer. Yes, he's given up a couple of home runs. Yes, he's given up a fair amount of hits. His ERA, I think, 7.20 on the spring so far. But in terms of the stuff, I think it's there, and he's a guy who, we've been talking about this. Obviously, can't write him off as a staple rotation just yet. But he's a guy who I think if he puts it together could be a really valuable guy in the back of the Orioles rotation.
And this is something that, I mean, if you watch the games from years past, this is exactly what Jim Palmer talks about whenever he talks about these young pitchers that come up with the Orioles is they have the talent, they have the tools, they lack the control or they lack the ability, like Ryan said, to put it all together, to just package it and go out and attack hitters, but not leave a ball over the middle of the plate. So, I mean, I feel like we've been doing this song and dance with our young pitchers for a very long time, and we're waiting for one of these guys to do what Jake Arrieta did with the Cubs, where you're just like, wow, okay, there it is, but he didn't do that with us. We're waiting for one of our guys. Maybe that's the development. Maybe I'm not sure exactly what that is because it doesn't seem that we can develop a pitcher, but they have the talent. It's just you gotta put it all together, get the control down. Like that seems to be the biggest issue is the control. It's like, you have a really good inning and then you end up walking 2 guys to start the next inning. It's like, it's maddening. Like we've been dealing with this for a very long time. It just, I don't know what else to say. It just drives me nuts.
Yeah, and it's the story of the 2 guys we saw a little bit from in 2020. It's not going to be Keegan Aiken. So hopefully Kramer's the guy who can figure it out, and he's not going to have a Jake Arrieta turnaround. Let's not get ahead of ourselves too much. Obviously, that's wishful thinking, but yeah, like I said, if he can figure it out and learn how to attack hitters a little bit better, he could be serviceable, and that's what I'm hoping for with him at this point.
Oh, yeah, and then you look at another guy who came in, piggybacked kind of with Kramer today, came in right after him, and that's Kyle Bradish. And Kyle Bradish struggled a little bit at Norfolk last year, got off to a hot start, struggled in the middle of the season, and he finished strong once Adley Rutschman got up to Norfolk. He has 4 innings pitched, just 3 hits allowed against 2 really good lineups. Bradish is going up against a pretty representative lineup for the Yankees in prime time last week in a 6 o'clock night game. And then he goes up against that Phillies lineup that's just monstrous right now. And he's held his own. Again, he hasn't given up a run yet this spring. Today was a little bit more of a struggle than the line score would have you think. 2 innings, no runs, but he walked 2 guys, gave up 2 hits. He threw 52 pitches to get through those 2 innings. He didn't give up any runs, so there was really just a lot of minimizing of the damage there. But this is a guy who's making a name for himself, stating his case to be part of this rotation. They're starting him every 5th day. They're lining him up for this season. He's still in camp after a lot of guys like Grayson Rodriguez and D.L. Hall were reassigned. I think Kyle Bradish has a real shot at this rotation moving forward. What do you guys think about Kyle?
The thing with Bradish has always been the walks. There's a lot to like about his profile. He's got some really good stuff, but the walks have always been an issue. Now, he has incrementally improved his walk rate the last 3 seasons in the minors, but that's something you want to see continue to trend in the right direction. And, he got to Norfolk last year, walked 4.1 batters per 9 after walking 3.3 batters per 9 innings at Bowie. So that's something you want to see continue to get better, especially as he gets to facing better competition. And so, Bradish is certainly a guy who I'd like to see get a legitimate run this year. I believe he was optioned today, so to AAA. So it's not likely that he'll start the season on the opening day roster, but I think we'll see him very shortly. And I'm certainly excited to see what he can bring to the table.
Yeah, I think that that's why they signed a guy like Chirinos. They wanted a veteran catcher behind the plate to be able to catch guys, the young guys, to help bring those young guys along. And who knows when Adley comes up? Maybe Adley comes up this year. And like you guys mentioned, he'll be a really good piece for the young pitchers as well. But I think a mixture of him and Chirinos would be really friendly to the rotation. And that's something that really, it's not something that goes on the stat sheet. It's not a sexy thing to talk about, but it really is important to be able to have a guy that you can trust back there, a guy that knows what he's doing. We really struggle with guys like Chance Sisco, who really didn't do a great job for us. So it's nice to have veteran presence, and then we know Adley's coming. We just don't know when. But it's nice to have those guys behind the plate because that helps with the development too.
Oh, yeah, I thought that Robinson Chirinos was a really quality signing. This was a guy who I had my eye on all off season, just waiting for that lockout to be over and see what kind of moves that they made. Because there wasn't a catcher on the 40-man roster. Now you've got him. It's probably going to be either Anthony Benboom or Jacob Nottingham that comes in and backs him up until Adley comes up. But I like what Chirinos can do with a pitching staff. I want to correct myself. I didn't realize, because I was prepping for the show, I didn't realize that Bradish had gotten option today. I'm actually very surprised to see that, because I thought that he was getting legitimate run to go out there and make that opening day rotation. So I'm a little bit shocked about that. But no, the catching is certainly important. And with guys like Chan Cisco and Pedro Severino, Severino was supposed to be known for his glove. And then he became more known for his bat, which is saying something, because the bat wasn't great when he was in Baltimore either. And Cisco was supposed to be known for his bat, and he just stopped being able to do anything as far as catching for the Baltimore Orioles. So to see a guy like Chirinos come in, knowing that you have Adley Rutschman waiting in the wings, who's coming up sooner rather than later, it's certainly important. And then the last thing I want to talk about as far as the starting rotation is concerned, because the writing's on the wall, Bruce Zimmerman's going to be in the starting rotation, I have to imagine. Tyler Wells is getting stretched out. And Tyler Wells, last year was the only time in his entire professional career that he's been a reliever. And that's because he was a Rule 5 draft pick, and they had to keep him on the roster, so they put him in the bullpen. This is a guy who's being stretched out. He pitched into the third inning the other day. He's made 2 starts, 4 2/3 innings pitched, allowed just the 1 run, 5 strikeouts, just the 1 walk. I think Tyler Wells is part of that opening day rotation. They didn't have enough time to get him stretched out to where he can be that guy who can go 5 or 6 innings. But I think they're looking at him to go maybe 3, 4 innings to start the year, and have a guy like Zach Lowther come in, piggyback with him, get you into the deeper part of the ball game, so you can go to that back end of your bullpen and bring in a guy like Dylan Tate and Tanner Scott and Cole Sulser to kind of shorten games for you. Tyler Wells, I'm pretty certain he's going to be part of this rotation when the season starts.
I'd be all right with it. I've never been a big proponent of doing that with relievers who have proven to be serviceable. And Wells was a great example last year of a guy who came along and made a name for himself to the point where he was getting save opportunities near the end of the season and pitching very well and throwing with energy. Not afraid to show his passion for the game. Love striking guys out, obviously, but I'm not completely opposed to the idea. I think there are a lot of places the Orioles need to improve, and the rotation is certainly one of them. The bullpen, I would argue, is one of them as well. But with that being said, if you can stretch Wells out, like you said, he has been a starter for his whole career up until last season when he was a Rule 5 pick at the big league level. If he can come back to form and pitch well and give us some innings and, keep us in ball games and, like you said, shorten the game for the bullpen a little bit, why not give it a try? It can't hurt.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like you said, it can't hurt. I mean, we we did a little thing with a guy named Zach Britton years ago, turned him from a starter to a closer, and that turned out pretty well. So, I mean, when you're a team with not a lot of options, and with your pitching staffs historically bad in years past, I mean, what does it really hurt? What is it? You never know. You might get a Zach Britton type move, or some guys really do thrive in a different role. I mean, so it can't hurt. I'm not opposed to it because, like we talked about earlier, there's not a whole lot when it comes to the rotation. The bullpen is going to be used a lot. There's going to be a lot of games, I'm sure, where guys go 3 or 4 innings or maybe even less, and the bullpen has to get stretched out. It's going to be a long year, I'm sure, in the rotation in that regard. So you might as well stretch guys out, might as well get them used to throwing a lot, whether it's in the rotation or coming in long relief. So, I mean, I'm not going to say I'm exactly excited for the rotation, but I mean, I know it is what it is at this point. I mean, it's like beating your head against the wall. We already know that, when it comes to the rotation. So we'll just kind of see what it is. And again, like I mentioned earlier, the offense is going to have to carry the load.
Well, I don't think we should discount what we're seeing going on with this team and how they're going about their rotation. And we're getting up in arms about the fact that a guy like Zach Davies signed for 1.5 million plus incentives that can get him up to 5.5 million with the Diamondbacks, and Michael Pineda signs for a team-friendly deal to go to the Tigers. You see Chris Archer get snatched up for 3 million, Tyler Anderson like 7 or 8 million to go to the Dodgers, and you're wondering why can't the Orioles make those moves? And for all we know, maybe they made an offer and the offer wasn't accepted, or it was lower than what the guy was looking for. We have no idea. We're not privy to that information. What I do know is that Grayson Rodriguez and DL Hall are coming. And if you happen to be able to watch that game today and watch DL Hall pitch, he touched 100 multiple times, 2 strikeouts in the inning on 15 pitches. The slider was absolutely filthy. The guy has big league stuff, and he's big league ready right now. He's being held back because he hasn't thrown more than 31 innings since 2019. He threw 91 innings in 2019. They had no season in 2020. Last year, he makes 7 starts, has the stress reaction in his elbow, only goes 32 and a third innings. This is a guy who Mike Elias and Brandon Hyde, I'm pretty sure, think he's big league ready now, but they want to monitor his innings so they can keep him healthy for the long haul. He's coming this year. Grayson Rodriguez is coming this year. And maybe they're sitting there and they're thinking, we're not going to bring these veterans in because we know that we're going to give these guys a lot of run this year. And when you combine that with a guy like Kyle Bradish maybe, and maybe Tyler Wells has some success in this rotation, I can understand the Orioles' thought process and wanting to see what their younger pitchers, who are maybe studs in that big league level, can offer them this year so that they can go into next off season knowing what they have, knowing what they don't have, and that's when they can finally start spending that money and get that payroll above $30 million for a change.
I like that point, Paul, and I'm very excited to see what the rotation looks like at the end of this season. I'm not too enthused about the opening day rotation, but by the end of the year, once guys start coming up and tracking some innings at the major league level, hopefully, like you said, we'll get an understanding of what we're working with and what holes we still need to fill moving forward. Hall optioned all the way down to Double-A, so he'll start the season there, and Mike Elias has said in interviews, I believe he said today that. He's a guy who's going to move quickly once we know that he's healthy and is going to be able to handle a workload. And I spoke with Matt Blood on my podcast before last season, and he said one of the big things that one of the hot button issues with player development with this Orioles team is making sure starting pitchers don't get hurt, because we want these guys to have longevity in their career. And we saw with Grayson Rodriguez last year, he never pitched more than 5 innings at a game with Double-A Bowie. That trend continued when he went up to Norfolk. So hopefully we'll start to see some of these guys get some more extended innings, get them to pitch through a lineup for a third time. But Hall is certainly a guy who showed today that he is ready to handle a major league lineup, and I'm excited to see it sooner rather than later.
And to be fair, my expectation all along was that DL Hall was going to start the year at Double-A Bowie because he only made 7 starts there last year. And like you said, I think he's going to move quickly. I think he's going to spend 2-3 weeks at Double-A, prove that he can be healthy and he can dominate. He'll get that call up to Norfolk. And I think this is a guy, if all goes well, if he can kind of command that strike zone a little bit better. And he even acknowledged that the guys are saying that he struggles to throw strikes. And he said, I don't struggle to throw strikes. I go for the strikeout. And so you're going to have to throw pitches that aren't in the strike zone a lot of times if you want to get a strikeout, get guys to chase your pitch. So I see where he's coming from with that. I think it's going to be sooner rather than later before he gets here. John, what are your thoughts?
Oh yeah, so you guys mentioned a few things. First of all, when you mentioned he only threw 5 innings and no more than that, I don't really go by the. I mean, I know they do, but I don't typically go by the inning count. I go by what pitch count they have him on, because you could throw 3 innings and throw 80 pitches, or you can throw 5 innings and throw 80 pitches. You know what I mean? It's the same amount of pitches, and that's what they ultimately go by. So yeah, I mean the X factor was. It was 5 innings, but I'm curious, and maybe we don't have the information to us, but I'm curious what the pitch count was for, like if there was like 80 each game, or if it was like 70 each game. I'm curious if there was a certain pitch count for him, or if they just said 5 innings, basically no matter what, unless you're at like 100 pitches. We're just going to keep you 5 innings, and your pitch count will just not really mess with that unless you hit like 100. I'm just kind of curious.
I think that the plan all along was, because there was no season in 2020, we're going to limit these guys. We're only going to give them what we give them so we keep them healthy, like Ryan said. I believe his high watermark last year was 86 pitches, and I think he did that in a game where he got a couple of outs in the 6th inning before being removed. But I would expect that number to move up to around the 90 to 100 mark. And I think that they're going to try and see what he can do 3 times through a lineup. I think he's going to get more of an opportunity to pitch deeper in Norfolk before they finally give him that call up to Baltimore, hopefully by May.
And something you guys, you talked about, I know Ryan talked about seeing guys at the end of the season, but if you remember, one of the new rules is you're allowed to expand your roster to 28 players until May 1st. So you will see these guys, unless they try and manipulate service time, which we know teams do. Who knows, if the Orioles want to manipulate time and leave these guys down for that first month and not utilize that opportunity to expand the roster until May 1st. But that is a chance to see these guys for the first almost month of the season. It's an opportunity to do that. So just keep that in mind because that's new to us in 2022.
I think one of the things I'm most excited about, and it's weird to say because it's pitching, is the bullpen. And Ryan, before I put my foot in my mouth again, has Felix Bautista been optioned yet?
He is not, as far as I'm aware.
See, this is a guy that I expect to break camp with the team. He was a phenomenal closer at Bowie and at Norfolk last year for the Orioles. They added him to the 40-man roster this offseason before the lockout started. He's been throwing BBs in camp. I know that the Dylan Tate has been throwing really well. I think he developed a cutter, I want to say, in the offseason. Tanner Scott's back with a healthier knee. And Tanner Scott's ERA was 2.65 in July, through July last year. And then he had the knee injury and completely fell apart after that. I think, and then you have Cole Sulser on top of that. I think the Orioles' back end of their bullpen can be a strength. It's just a matter of having that rotation get you more than 4 1/3 innings, which is all they were doing last year. They were averaging 4 1/3 innings per start and taxing that bullpen. The bullpen was a strength in 2020 and started out of strength in 2021 until they got absolutely overworked and completely taxed. I'm looking forward to seeing what this bullpen can do, and hopefully they'll take some of the burden off them by getting some starters that can go a little bit deeper into ball games.
Yeah, you said it. I don't have any analysis further than that. The X factor is going to be the rotation and how deep they can go into games because, like you said, last year it was all burnout. There's talent in the bullpen, but when they're throwing as many innings as they were last year, it's gonna by the end of the season you're gonna be struggling, and that's what we saw from a lot of the guys out there. But you mentioned Dylan Tate figured out a cutter this offseason. I love a good cutter sinker combination on a pitcher. That's especially if you can tunnel those pitches, that's a devastating 2-pitch mix right there. And mix in his breaking ball, and I think we're working with something special with Tate out of the bullpen.
Yeah, and I just before we wrap up, I think it's interesting how they didn't sign anybody to eat innings this year. If you remember the past few years, they kind of signed some veterans they knew that there was going to be a long season with the rotation. They knew that there was going to be some games where there was going to be some veterans they just asked to go and take some punches, take some slaps to the face like Will Smith to Chris Rock. There was some veterans that they signed in years past that they knew they're like, hey, you're going to eat some innings this year. You might get your ERA up a little bit. Surprised they didn't do that this year. There's nobody really on the roster to do that. I mean, Means and Lyles really are the only starters, I believe, that are capable of eating up bigger innings like 7, which you don't typically see nowadays.
Well, Lyles, I think, was brought in for that specific reason. I mean, his numbers aren't pretty, but he works deep into games, and I think that's something that's going to help the bullpen in the long term. So, yeah, you'd like to see more than just that as a signing to help out the rotation. But I think Paul, you've talked about on Twitter a few times that there are a few starts from Lyles that were really bad, but overall it was solid. So hopefully he's a guy who can get some innings, pitch into the 7th a few times, and help out the bullpen.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing about Lyles I want to get out there real quick is that, yeah, when you look at the ERA and you see 5.15, you're like, well, that's not any good. And then you see the 38 home runs that led the American League. You're like, well, that's not any good. Well, thank God they moved that wall back if they're going to have Jordan Lyles in that rotation. But the numbers are a little bit misleading. He had more starts of 5 innings pitched than 3 runs or less than any starter in the Orioles rotation from last year. More quality starts than any starter, including John Means. 2 out of every 3 starts, Jordan Lyles was really good. He made 32 appearances, 30 starts. In 23 of those appearances, his ERA was 3.20, including his two relief appearances, where he threw 13 innings in those two relief appearances and only gave up 3 earned runs. In 9 of those outings, his ERA was 12.40. But his 4 to 5 starts in September, I think he only gave up 4 runs the entire month because he figured out a different pitch combination and started relying more on the secondary stuff instead of that fastball, and he was a much more effective pitcher. I'm excited to see what Jordan Lyles can do in now a more pitcher-friendly ballpark, which is weird to say about Camden Yards. It's a pitcher-friendly ballpark now, and with Chris Holt at the helm and the analytics department really working their tail off with these pitchers, I'm excited to see what Jordan Lyles can do, and maybe he can carry over that September success into 2022. I think that's a better get than people are giving it credit for the Orioles.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you there. I think it's, obviously you like someone with a little bit better numbers, but for $7 million, he fits the Orioles payroll, and hopefully, like I said, he's going to help out the bullpen a little bit by eating some innings, and maybe he'll win us some ball games.
Yeah, we'll I think that's something that you can hopefully expect. The offense is going to have to do their part. The bullpen's going to have to do their part. Look, it's not going to be a pretty season for the Orioles. We know that, especially in the American League East. I think they'll be more competitive this year. I think that they'll put a better product on the field. They're not really flipping that switch yet towards wins, but it's more the evaluation period. 2023, we'll see a much better team, I would like to believe. But in 2022, it should be at least more fun than the previous 4 seasons. Didn't get to talk about the shortstops today. We'll talk about that next week as we preview the season for the Orioles and for Major League Baseball. But guys, this was our inaugural show, our pilot episode of Oh What a Show, for lack of a better term as far as pilot is concerned. And a lot of fun talking about some Orioles baseball today. I can't wait to get back here next Monday and do it again.
And we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for tuning in.